Hey, welcome. It's Kevin Sedbeck, Chief Safety Officer for S3 Consultants, and we're working up to Module 2 of our Part 5 SMS development for Part 135 operators. This is the Part 5 SMS development process overview. So let's get started.
Here's the agenda slide, which will prepare you and set expectations for this module. And remember from the first module that won't be reading the slides to you, so stop and pause, review the slides, and listen to my take on the issues presented by the FAA Part 5 requirement to have a regulatory compliant SMS. We'll talk more. All right, when you're reading the AC advisory circular on this 120-92 Delta, I believe, there's some clarity, but there could be some more clarity on the development process. I put it in 3-phase: design, implementation, and declaration of compliance. The design and implementation phase is like a Venn diagram. There's going to be some merging between the two, because as you're designing, it always starts out with designing the safety policy first, and then building on that. So you'll design the safety policy and implement it, and then you'll start designing the rest of it, safety risk management, safety risk assessment, or safety assurance, and then the safety promotion. But again, the most important thing you do is keep it simple. You don't want to overly have a complex SMS. You already know what you already know, so stick to it. And then implementation phase is kind of tough, because that's when you got to implement things. And the interfaces, as we discussed, is going to be a little bit of a struggle, so that'll probably be your most complex task. And then at the end, once everything's done and you got it up and going and running, you got processes in place, a method to document things, and your training going, because you'll have to do a little bit of safety training. Then you can ship off the declaration of compliance, which is they list in the AC how to write it. So, but it's not that complex. Right, the FAA requirements on this, as the AC will kind of tell you how to write it. It gives some other helpful hints. The general requirements are you got to have all the components. And if development implement an SMS under this part, you must maintain the SMS under this part. Interesting use of the conditional if, because it's pretty much mandatory now for 121, 135, and the air tour folks. So we'll be going down this road and talking about the individual components per their subparts, and highlighting things that you'll need to know, tips that'll help make it easier, and how to ensure the FAA is happy with what you wrote. Glance at this design phase overview, but the biggest thing is your safety policy, because it'll guide you on the rest of the document, and it'll set the tone for what you expect everyone to do: employees, post holders, director of ops, director of safety, chief pilot, line pilots, line maintenance, so forth and so on, because it provides you with a number of, it requires you to identify and establish safety controls and standards, and safety accountabilities, and some other things. So it's the most important document that you're going to develop. It's like your strategic plan. It kind of sets the tone for everything else, and it sets the expectation of your employees and staff on what they're expected to do. And again, safety objectives, we kind of talked about it in the previous module. You really want to set up what is causing you unplanned loss, as the insurance guys say, because you want to stop that. You don't, two things. You want to prevent the accident, and you want to prevent what's causing you to lose money because you're operating inefficiently. And also, if you're losing money, it's probably because of things like FOD or other damage. And so you want to mitigate that through a safety program. And by mitigating FOD also prevents accidents. So everything you do is for the ultimate goal of preventing the accident and keeping the company running in its operations and viable, as I would tell people. Safety ensures you can go home at the end of the day. Your performance, or how you make money, ensures you can come back tomorrow. So that's kind of the tone you want to have with this. And then you can see the other aspects of it: safety risk management, safety assurance, safety promotion. As I said before, the design phase and the implementation phases are not separate phases. Yeah, you'll start out designing your SMS, but then you're also going to start implementing it. So they'll tend to overlap. Like I said, kind of a Venn diagram, or if you got a Gantt chart, you got things overlapping because as you're going through it, you want to be getting it going and executing, because what you'll need eventually is some documentation of what you're doing to show to the FAA, yep, we're doing it, because that's, I'm sure all of you have had a surveillance visit by the FAA, so you know how they're going to come and look at you, because they're going to look at your documentation of what you're doing, plus they'll do some observations while you surveillance. The biggest thing is, note, implementation strategy discussions are for illustration only and neither impose requirements or mandate specific resource allocation. So don't take those implementation strategies as like, oh, that's what I got to do. No, you don't have to do it. Again, you leverage the things that already work for you. You already got stuff that works. You already got to accept a manual, all the other stuff. Don't take those recommendations as gospel. Just is advice. Keep it simple. Don't reinvent the wheel. And start out small and mature your SMS, because there's also that concept of continuous improvement, which is embedded in the advisory circular. So use that to your advantage. Start out kind of simple, get an understanding, get your head wrapped around it, and then start growing it so that it'll fit your operation. Don't overdo it. You don't need an overly complex safety program. You just need an effective safety program. Big slide: safety, accountability, and authority. So the big thing here and for your company is who is responsible for safety in your company. Accountable executive always, LFA, final authority, finances, whatever. All members of management in regards to developing and maintaining the SMS process. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a small group, don't hire a director of safety or safety manager or anything like that. But you do have to instill upon your people that, hey, Director of Ops, you're in charge of safety for operations. Director of Maintenance, you're in charge of safety for maintenance. Chief Pilot, you're in charge of safety to train the guys or maintain the guys or keep the pilots doing their job safely. And so they're the ones who are going to be doing this. They're the ones who are going to make the decisions on how to do safety that's delegated to you. And you have to identify these people and the levels of management with the authority to make decisions regarding safety risk acceptance. Who can accept the risk on behalf of the company? And like I said earlier, it's El Jefe, the accountable executive. He controls everything, whether it's general manager, owner, president, managing director, whatever the name is. And then the known names: director of ops, director of maintenance, chief pilot, that are the certificated people, and any process owners if you're a complex operation. And we'll talk about single pilot SMS later. Okay. A lot of people get stuck on this thing where, oh, the pilot's they're the single point of failure for safety. It's like, no, as Keith Rayleigh from the Forest Service says, the pilot cannot resolve all the latent conditions of management. And what that means is management makes decisions on how the pilots are going to fly, whether they're right or wrong or good or bad. Now, what happens is the pilot now has to resolve those so that they can fly a safe mission or a safe flight or whatever you want to call it. But sometimes they can't resolve it all and they get in a bind. So that's why it can't just fall to the pilots. So safety, accountability, and authority. The key element in this is who makes these decisions. And if you're small, I'm going to keep harping on it, is the DOM and the DOO. DOO for pilots, DOO for maintenance, because how you maintain your aircraft has a big say in it having safe flight operations. And they're the ones with the authority to make the changes in the systems and procedures. They're the ones who can revise the GOM. They're the ones who can revise the GMM. And thus they're the ones who should be revising the GMM in light of this SMS, which is now your structured process on how to identify hazards and risk and how to mitigate them and determine what's acceptable or what needs mitigations or what's unacceptable risk. And as I said before, if it's acceptable, give it the green light, move on. And then if it's unacceptable, stop everything, figure it out. And then there's the big middle ground, acceptable with mitigations, where it's like, okay, what do we need to do? Safety controls, whatever. Now, all employees should be aware of the organization's safety policies and their role in it, because they're the ones who are going to do the hazard reporting of the things you don't identify when you make a change to your system. And employees at all levels have a responsibility to report hazards, safety issues, safety concerns. And again, it's not the company versus the employee. It's the company and the employee working together to solve the issue, because they can see it, so they're identifying it. You may be up higher and you're looking at the vast landscape and you may not see that bug over there doing something. So you have to rely on your employees to do the safety reporting so that you can find out the things that you didn't fix when you were doing your SRM process. And now you have to fix it. You'll use the SRM process, but instead of you identifying it through that, the employee identified it, and now you got to roll it into the SRM process. So again, and this should be done by the DOO and DOM because they manage the GOM and the GMM. Your manual's full of your safety controls. So that's where the Safety Accountability Authority lies. To make risk decisions. Hey, if you're the owner of the company, do you really want that line pilot making all the risk decisions for your company to make a determination? Because if they make the wrong one, it may kill the company. So you really got to think about, as the accountable executive, regardless of how you are identified or if you're the owner or not, and your management team, which I would say, if you're not that big, is a DOO, DOM, and chief pilot. How are you going to delegate risk decisions? Because you just don't want your line pilots making huge risk decisions for your company. But you have to delegate an appropriate level, an appropriate amount. So here's the example I'll give. In the helicopter world, a concept called land and live. And that, in my view, is for the helicopters was a big concept that is reducing the number of accidents. Because now you give the frontline pilot an out when the operational risk during flight reaches an unacceptable level. And I'll use the fire traffic area. That place can get hairy during a fire. And sometimes you just got to say, I got to bail out because it's just getting too hairy. And what that does is that breaks the accident chain and ensures that you can fly another day. And it's easy to explain to the forcers, like, hey, sorry, bud, it just got too hairy in there. And so we took a time out and either landed or we just left the area till things calmed down and came back in. Because, again, they want safe operations also. So this policy was, is an idea by Helicopter Associations International, and they changed their name to whatever, Verticon or whatever they're called now. However, it's something that the DOO and the chief pilot develop, the accountable executive approves, signs in the policy, and then you train the guys. And of course, during the development, you use the SRM matrix to identify any hazards associated with the new policy, assess the risks, get them down to acceptable, and then you implement the policy, get everybody trained, signed on, document the training, and then they go out and do it. And again, I said it twice, document the training, because someone will want to see it later. Covered the big things for this initial phase, which is there are kind of three phases: design, implementation, and the letter. However, they're not separate phases. While you're designing, you're also implementing. You'll design and finish one part, implement it, and then design the next part, implement it, then design the next part, implement it. So it's kind of a rolling or a staggered rollout is what we would say. And we'll talk a little bit more about these separate phases. And the thing that we'll begin with eventually is the safety policy, because that's the biggest thing. And then we'll give you some tips on how to write it, like want to use Chat GPT or things like that, because it does the drudgery of the work and you just focus on the details of your business or how you operate so that you can address them in your safety policy. And we're going to do this little chunks at a time, and we'll talk more about this later.
All right. Kevin Sebbeck, Chief Safety Officer for S3 Consultants. And that's the end of Module 2, and we'll be moving on. So it's a little fast and furious, but you can always ask questions. All right, thanks. Good day.